Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. The day my husband, Alan, walked out the door, it was as if a storm had taken my whole world. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the beginning of a journey I could never have anticipated. The year was 2008, and we had been married for over 15 years. On the outside, everything seemed perfect. A beautiful home, 2 wonderful children, and a life that many people would envy. But beneath the surface, cracks had been forming for years. Alan was a good man, but somewhere along the way he had become distant, almost cold. We didn't talk the way we used to, and when we did, it felt more like business than anything else. The affection had faded, replaced by a routine that we both knew was unhealthy, but neither of us had the courage to confront. The first sign something was wrong came a few months before he left. Alan had become secretive about his work, coming home late and often avoiding eye contact. He would disappear into his study, and when I asked, "How was your day?" the answer was always the same: busy. I never pushed further, but deep down I knew something had shifted, and then one day it happened. Alan came to me after dinner, sat me down, and told me that he was leaving. No tears, no remorse, just a flat, matter-of-fact statement. His words hit me like a slap in the face. He was leaving because he had fallen in love with someone else. I was crushed, but it wasn't the devastation that I felt the most. It was the shock. He had been seeing her for months, a woman he met at work. Her name was Tanya, and from what I could gather, she was everything I wasn't anymore: young, lively, and spontaneous. The worst part was the realization that while I had been giving my all to our family, Alan had been finding solace in the arms of another woman. He packed his bags that night, and I watched him leave. But it wasn't just his departure that devastated me. It was the fact that he was walking away from everything we had built together. For years, I had been his partner, his confidant, his love. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces, trying to make sense of how things had gone so wrong. After Alan left, things were never the same. I was in a daze, going through the motions of daily life, trying to keep things together for our children. My son, Ethan, was 16 at the time, and my daughter, Lily, was 13. Ethan had always been close to Alan, often going on fishing trips or car rides together. But after the separation, Ethan withdrew into himself. He became quiet, and for a while, I didn't know how to reach him. A few weeks after Alan moved out, Ethan came to me one evening. He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the walls, his hands gripping a mug of tea tightly. I could see the strain on his face, a mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. "Mom," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I need to tell you something about Dad, ... I turned towards him, holding my breath. I had no idea what to expect. But what Ethan shared with me that night shattered me even more than Alan's departure. Ethan explained how he had accidentally overheard a conversation between Alan and Tanya just before Alan had left. It was clear that the affair had been going on for much longer than I had known. Alan hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been planning his exit for months. The worst part, Ethan said, was that Alan had told Tanya he would never be a real father to Ethan and Lily again. He had chosen her, and nothing would stand in the way of their future together. Ethan's words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had known the affair had been serious, but hearing that Alan was already making plans for a new life, completely abandoning his children, was gut-wrenching. Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and hurt. "I hate him, Mom," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "He left us for her, and he doesn't even care about us anymore." I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out, but I knew I couldn't. Ethan needed me to be strong, to hold it together for him. But it was so hard. I felt like the world I had once known was slipping away, and I was powerless to stop it. As the weeks turned into months, I began to notice small changes in Ethan. He started coming home later, staying out with friends more. Often, I tried to talk to him about it, but he would shut me out, the way he had when Alan first left. One evening after dinner, he asked if we could talk. I agreed, unsure of what to expect. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice filled with a sincerity that caught me off guard. "I know things have been really hard for you, and I've been angry at Dad for leaving. But I don't want to see you like this anymore. I want to help you heal." I could see the determination in his eyes. Ethan was growing into a young man, and the compassion he showed me that night was something I hadn't expected. He wasn't just trying to fix me. He was trying to heal us both. For the next few months, Ethan became my rock. He would help me with house chores, make dinner when I couldn't find the energy, and just be there to talk when I needed him most. His presence in my life, especially after everything that had happened with Alan, gave me the strength I needed to move forward. But it wasn't just Ethan's actions that changed things. It was one particular evening when I was at my lowest that a moment passed between us, a moment that I will cherish forever. It was late, and we were sitting together on the porch, looking at the stars. Ethan had his guitar with him, and he started strumming softly. He wasn't the best guitarist, but it was the effort, the gesture that warmed my heart. We sat in silence for a while, the cool night air surrounding us, when Ethan turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "You've always been there for me, Mom, even when everything seemed like it was falling apart. You're stronger than, and I'll always be here for you, no matter what." That simple statement, spoken from the heart, was more than I could have asked for. It was a reminder that despite everything Alan had taken from us, I still had someone by my side who truly cared. It wasn't the same as before. Things would never be the same as they had been. But in that moment, I realized that I wasn't completely alone. Ethan had given me something I had thought was gone forever. Hope. In the years that followed, things slowly began to heal. Alan remained a distant memory and faded from our lives. I poured my love into my children, and though the scars of infidelity would always linger, we rebuilt what had been broken. Ethan went on to college and eventually moved out, but we stayed close. Whenever I feel like the world is too much to handle, I think back to that moment on the porch with the music of his guitar playing in the background and his words filling my heart. It was a moment of unconditional love, the kind I had once hoped for from Alan, but had found in the most unexpected place. And even now, when I look back, I can't help but think that, in the end, it was Ethan's love, his strength, and his kindness that helped me rise from the ashes of betrayal and build a life worth living once again. As time went on, I found myself navigating a new reality. My world was no longer anchored by the presence of Alan. It was just me and my children, trying to rebuild a sense of normalcy. But the truth was, normal was a foreign concept now. My days were often filled with a strange mixture of emotions, sadness, anger, and at times, numbness. I wondered how I could move on from the man I had loved for so long, the father of my children, the one I had thought I'd spend my whole life with. How could I reconcile the love I had for him with the betrayal I felt? But as much as I had tried to keep my emotions hidden, to put on a brave face for the sake of my kids, there were moments when the weight of it all became too much. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind running through the same thoughts over and over. How could he have done this to me, to our children? Wasn't I enough? But in the mornings when I would wake up, the harsh reality of the world would hit me once again. I had to keep going, keep moving forward. And for that, I leaned heavily on Ethan. It wasn't just his physical presence that helped me. It was his emotional maturity. His strength in the face of all the turmoil was more than I could have asked for. He never once blamed me for Alan's actions. Even when I blamed myself, Ethan would remind me that none of this was my fault. One afternoon, a few months after Alan left, I was cleaning the living room when I found an old photograph of Alan and me smiling in front of our first home, a memory from a happier time. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the edges of the photograph with my fingers. The pain of losing him, of losing everything we had worked for, was still fresh. I found myself asking, what went wrong? Ethan, who had walked into the room quietly, stood behind me. Mom, are you okay? His voice was soft, cautious, as if he knew how fragile I still was. I could hear the concern in his tone, the same way he had spoken that night on the porch. I turned to him, surprised by how much he had grown. In the last few months, Ethan had transformed into someone who was no longer just my son, but also a young man with a wisdom I couldn't ignore. His eyes had lost the wild sadness they had once held. They had become steadier, more grounded. I'm fine, I lied. But he could tell I wasn't. Ethan had always been perceptive, perhaps even more so than I had realized. He didn't push me, but he sat down next to me, pulling his knees to his chest, his guitar resting on the floor beside him. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past few months hanging in the air. I know you miss him, Mom, Ethan said after a long pause, but I think you're better off without him. He didn't deserve you. He doesn't deserve us. His words caught me off guard. I had never truly heard him speak like this before. I had always known that he was upset with Alan, but I'd never realized the depth of his anger, his disillusionment. Ethan wasn't just angry at Alan for leaving us. He was angry for the way his father had betrayed him, for the way he had chosen someone else over his family. I don't want you to be sad anymore, Ethan continued, looking at me with determination. I want you to be happy. I want you to smile again, Mom. Tears welled up in my eyes, but this time they weren't just from pain. They were tears of gratitude. Ethan's words weren't just comforting, they were a wake-up call. I had been so consumed by my own heartbreak, so caught up in my anger and hurt, that I had forgotten what was truly important. Ethan needed me to heal, not for him, but for me. I had to find the strength to let go of the past, to let go of Alan, and start rebuilding my own happiness. That night, I decided to take the first step toward healing. I called a therapist I had been considering seeing for weeks, but had put off because of the shame I felt. The next morning I went. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I needed to try. I needed to make sure that my kids, especially Ethan, saw me get better. They needed to see that despite everything, life could go on. The therapy sessions helped. Slowly, I began to work through the layers of grief, the betrayal, and the guilt. There were good days and bad days, but I started to feel like I was regaining control of my life. I learned that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to live with the pain, acknowledging it, and allowing it to shape me into someone stronger, someone who could rise above the ashes of a broken marriage. Ethan's support was unwavering during this time. He became more involved in my healing process, making sure I wasn't bottling up my emotions or pushing myself too hard. He encouraged me to go out with friends, to rediscover the hobbies I'd given up on, and even to start dating again. And though I wasn't ready to jump into a new relationship, I appreciated the push. It was Ethan who reminded me that I deserved love, and that it didn't have to come from Alan. It could come from within myself, and from the people who truly cared for me, people like Ethan. A year after Alan's departure, I received a letter. From him, I didn't expect it, and when I saw his handwriting, my heart dropped into my stomach. The letter was brief. He apologized for his actions, but it was clear that he had moved on with Tanya. He had no plans to come back, and he had no intention of being involved in our lives, beyond occasional check-ins. I couldn't bring myself to read the letter again. I folded it, put it in a drawer, and closed it. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to hold on to the past. Alan was part of my history, but he no longer had a place in my future. A few months later, Ethan graduated high school. The day of his graduation, I stood there, proud beyond words. Ethan had grown into a compassionate, strong young man, someone who had weathered the storm with me without ever faltering. He was ready to take on the world, and I couldn't have been prouder. As I hugged him tightly, whispering how proud I was of him, I realized something profound. He had been my anchor through it all. While Alan's betrayal had shattered my heart, it was Ethan who had helped me rebuild it. He had given me a glimpse into a future I never thought possible, a future filled with hope, strength, and the kind of love that didn't depend on someone else's choices. I will always cherish the moment he shared with me that night on the porch, the The night he reminded me of the woman I was before the betrayal, the woman I could still be. In the end, it was Ethan, not Alan, who showed me the true meaning of love, loyalty, and family. As I watched Ethan walk across the stage to accept his diploma, I felt a wave of peace wash over me. My life was no longer defined by Alan's departure. It was defined by the love of a son who had carried me when I couldn't carry myself. And that, I knew, was the moment I would always cherish. As the months passed, life began to take on a rhythm again, though it was a new, unfamiliar one. Ethan had gone off to college, and though I missed him terribly, I was proud of the young man he was becoming. The house felt emptier without him, and some days I wondered what my life would look like now. I had finally started feeling at peace with a new direction, free from Alan's shadow. But as with all things that seem calm on the surface, there were undercurrents beneath. My healing had been a slow process, but I was learning to live again. Slowly but surely, I had even started dating. Nothing serious, just meeting a few new people, feeling a little spark of hope here and there. It was a breath of fresh air, though I still wasn't ready for a full commitment. But I felt like I was moving forward. And then the phone call came. It was a Friday afternoon. I had just finished a meeting for a freelance project I had picked up. A small but promising gig to get my creative juices flowing. I had just sat down with a cup of coffee when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? I answered, not expecting anything unusual. Is this Sarah Moore? A calm yet authoritative voice asked. Double quotes, yes. This is Sarah. Who's speaking? My name is Detective Richards from the Westbrook Police Department. I need to speak with you regarding an incident involving your ex-husband, Alan Moore. I felt my heart skip a beat, my stomach twisted with unease. What now? After everything that had happened, after the distance and the years of healing, I never expected this. Is something wrong? I asked, trying to steady my voice. It's about your ex-husband, Detective Richards continued. We need you to come in for a statement. I paused, my mind racing. Why? What happened? There was a long pause before the detective answered. Your ex-husband is missing Sarah. He hasn't been seen or heard from for the past 2 days. We found his car abandoned outside of a park, but there's no sign of him. The situation doesn't look good. The words hit me like a freight train. My mind couldn't process them fast enough. Alan missing? He had been absent from our lives for so long, I had almost forgotten that he existed in any other capacity than a distant memory. I had moved on. Ethan had moved on. We had let him go, and now this. I don't understand, I stammered. How is he missing? What happened? We're not sure yet, the detective replied, his tone cautious. But we need to ask you some questions. Have you heard from him recently? Have you noticed anything unusual? I shook my head, but then I remembered the letter from Alan the first had put away in the drawer. I hadn't opened it, but I knew it contained an apology, a sense of finality. He had written to me, but even that felt distant now, part of a past I was trying to bury. No, I said softly, feeling the weight of the years come crashing down. I haven't heard from him. Not in months. Not since ... since he left? The detective finished for me. Yes, I whispered. Do you have any reason to believe someone might want to harm him? The question felt sharp, urgent, and I froze. No, I lied, my mind racing. Of course, there had been resentment, pain, but harm. The thought seemed too extreme. Alan had made his choice, but I couldn't fathom anyone hurting him over it. Could I? We'll need you to come down to the station for questioning. It's standard procedure. I agreed, albeit hesitantly, and hung up. My thoughts swirled as I stared blankly at the wall. Alan missing? How could this happen? What if something terrible had happened to him? The next morning, I went to the station, my hands trembling as I signed in. Detective Richards led me to a small room and asked me to sit down. There was an uncomfortable silence as he prepared some papers in front of him. Sarah, I need to. ask you a few more questions," the detective began. "This might be difficult to hear, but we've learned some things that don't add up. Alan's recent actions, his relationships, and his finances. It seems there's been more going on, behind the scenes than anyone realized." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. What was he talking about? "Detective, what do you mean? What's this about?" "There's a connection we found between Alan and a few unsavory individuals," he said, pausing to gauge my reaction. "We believe Alan might have been involved in something criminal before he went missing." My stomach dropped. Criminal? Alan? The man I had once known, how could this be possible? "But Alan, he's always been distant, yes, but he's never been a criminal. What are you talking about?" My voice quivered as I asked. "Your ex-husband had been in touch with a group involved in money laundering," the detective revealed, watching me closely. "It appears he may have gotten involved in something far darker than anyone realized. We believe he may have gotten too deep, and it's possible that someone wanted him out of the picture." My mind was reeling. Alan had been involved with criminals. The realization hit me like a blow to the chest. Everything about the man I had once known felt like a lie. The affairs, the lies, the secrecy, it was all a mask for something much darker. Was that why he left so suddenly? To escape from the mess he had created? But there was more. "Sarah," the detective said, his tone lowering, "we've also discovered something else. Alan wasn't just in contact with these individuals. He had made an emergency transfer of large sums of money just days before his disappearance money that seems to have gone to Tanya. We're working on tracing it. Tanya, the woman Alan had left me for. Of course, she had to be involved." It all started to make sense in the worst way. "I need you to tell me everything you know about her. Sarah, we need to get to the bottom of this, and your information could help." A sickening realization washed over me. What if Alan's disappearance wasn't an accident? What if he had gotten caught up in something far more sinister, something he couldn't escape from? As the detective continued his line of questioning, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Nothing was as it seemed. Alan's betrayal wasn't just an affair, it was a whole other life, filled with secrets and danger. And now it seemed that his son and I were caught up in it, whether we wanted to be or not. The truth was out there. And I was about to discover that the man I had once loved wasn't the only one capable of betrayal. The plot thickened. Alan's disappearance wasn't just about infidelity, it was about a hidden world of crime, lies, and manipulation. And now I had to decide, could I ever really escape from the shadows of the past?